Welcome to the Learning Reinvented Podcast, brought to you by myself, Katie Godden, and the team at the Learning Effect. There are lots of learning podcasts out there, so we wanted to do something slightly different. This week, we're discussing learning and education. I'm delighted to welcome Jonas Ileka to the podcast. Thank you for joining me, Jonas. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Katie. It's an absolute pleasure. I am Jonas Ileka. I always say that I struggle to sort of introduce myself and define myself because I'm always afraid to put myself in a box. But I think if there's something that truly defines me is that I'm passionate about people. I'm an HR practitioner specializing in organizational development and learning and culture, as well as culture and transformation. So yes, in short, I'm an HR practitioner.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining me today. So do you want to start by giving us a bit of a background about your career history to date?
Great. So I started off my career, I think I was very fortunate to start off my career in really small organizations. I studied human resources, perhaps a side story. It's not what I intended to do, like so many HR practitioners that I've met and that I know. So I initially wanted to do architecture, but as fate would have it, I ended up in HR. So before I graduated, I did an internship at a company called Sun Group International. It's a Chinese multinational company operating here in Windhoek, Namibia. So I started off there as an HR assistant. I moved on to a company in the coast here in Namibia, based in the coast here called Global Progressive Synergy. That was also a multinational company specializing in management consulting and training management. And that's really where I got my first exposure to the world of learning and training. I then moved on to a company called Efrise Group Holdings, where I was a consultant on a project for the Port Authority in Namibia called NAMPort. And then thereafter, I moved on to the Namibia University of Science and Technology, where I spent about 7 years. And I joined the university at a very opportune time, where the university was going through a transformation from a technicon to a university. And I was part of the OD team that drove that culture transformation is also responsible for organizational development and learning. So after 7 good years at the university, I moved on to MITCO, which is the Meat Corporation of Namibia, where I joined them as the manager for human capital. I was there for close to 2 years. And then that time I was also acting executive for human capital, basically overseeing HR operations, which obviously includes HR administration, performance management, organizational learning for the MITCO group, which is subsidiaries in the UK as well as South Africa and Namibia. And now I am the People and Culture Manager at the World Wildlife Fund.
Well, it sounds like you've definitely had quite a varied career there. What are the significant points about your career that you feel that are significant?
Great. I think, Katie, I've had quite a number of them, but I think the common thread about all of them is mentorship. I think I was very fortunate. As I said earlier, that I joined small organizations, and the reason I said that was because it provided room for learning because the operations were so small and the team was so tightly knit. So for me, those moments in my career that I feel had a very huge impact was where I met mentors. My very first mentor was at Sun Group International, Catherine. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned from her really is to fail forward and fail fast. So she allowed me good room to learn and to develop. And then thereafter, when I went to work for Global Progressive Synergy, I was being mentored by Ms. Babel Kirchner, very experienced, very talented lady. And we worked very closely with her. And I think she's really the one that introduced me to consulting in general and to thought leadership specifically. And then thereafter, when I moved on to Efrise, I was being mentored by Ms. Irma Solomons. We're still very close to this day. And really, I learned the business acumen side of things and some of the technical HR things like performance management and organizational development. But I think the moment that stands out the most for me was when I moved on to NUST, the university here. That's when I met I would say, proper mentor, because he's been my mentor for over 10 years now, Mr. Shiwana Ndeunyema. And he's really one of those mentors that allowed me to grow into myself and to find myself. So apart from all the technical stuff that I've learned from him, I think he built my character, especially around things like integrity, work ethic, and stuff like that. So I think what stands out in my career is really those moments where I met these amazing people that were kind enough to share their knowledge and their time with me to groom me into I would say, pretty decent HR practitioner.
That's great. And it sounds like you've met some really, really awesome people along your career. Are you actually going into mentoring now? Have you got anyone that's there that's looking to you for knowledge, etc.?
Definitely. I think I start the charity at home, literally. So my siblings, and my cousins and my close family, I mentor them, give them career advice and help them in their careers and general mentorship. But I also have some formal mentees that have sort of approached me and that I'm helping with, helping them with. I'm lucky that I've had some great mentors, because then I understand what mentorship is all about. To what extent do I mentor someone? To what extent do I allow them to make mistakes and learn on their own?
So apart from like the mentoring ship side of things, what other projects are you actually involved in?
Quite a bit, Katie. My family always accuses me of being a workaholic. My response is always that it doesn't feel like work. So I'm involved in quite a few things besides my day job, which I'm quite passionate about. I founded Pulse HR Network last year, which is really a thought leadership platform and community of learning for HR practitioners here in Namibia. And Pulse HR Network publishes a bi-monthly magazine called Pulse HR Magazine, that basically shares, latest trends, cutting edge developments in the field of HR, challenges, opportunities, and so forth. So that's one of the projects that I am working on. And through that project, we've actually recently signed up as the country partner for 4-Day Week Global, where we'll be launching, or we've actually launched a 4-day week trial here in Namibia, becoming the second country in Africa to do so. And we're really excited about that. Apart from that, I'm also a member of the Namibia the Namibian Chartered Institute for Human Resources, which is a professional body based here in Windhoek, Namibia, where I am a board member. And then apart from that, really, it's just extramural activities, try to make the most of the youth.
I definitely agree with your family that it sounds like you are a workaholic. So you mentioned obviously learning and development and the challenges, and obviously you're doing that with the Pulse Network over in Namibia. But what challenges do you think you guys face in regards to learning and development? Because I'm just interested to see if they're similar to the rest of the world. I'm sure they are, but it's just an intrigue.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. I think for us here, the biggest challenge is really career. I think it would be career pathing or career development, and how that aligns to training, learning, and development. Because when I think about my career, especially being in HR and being specifically in learning and development, I think I operate at the intersection of education and the work. And one challenge that I'm seeing is that either there's not enough information, or people aren't aware of how to go about it, but there's no alignment really in terms of balancing out organizational objectives and individual career aspirations when it comes to learning and development. So that's one area I think that there's a huge gap, and it's quite a big challenge, because sometimes then there's no return on investment. Either someone that funds their own studies or invest in a training, or when the company does it, there's very minimal return on investment, because those two elements are not speaking to each other. So that's one. Number two, in terms of learning challenges, I think finance is definitely a challenge. Funding, learning, funding, education in general, is quite a challenge. I think people are more and more starting to wake up to the fact that it's an investment more than anything else. Because I think probably over the past decade or so, I've seen really a shift, where people used to see education is and learning is not so important, but now people are really investing in themselves. But funding is still a huge challenge. It is being kept breached to some extent. We have a training levy here, a vocational education and training levy. So that sort of subsidizes the training that companies invest in, and it's quite helpful. I think the third one really is work-life balance. People are extremely busy, and they don't have that time to study and to learn even. And I always say, especially in the workplace, people you organize a training, and people tell you, no, we're busy. But if they attend that training, then that workload reduces significantly. So I think just that awareness is also missing a bit.
Do you think that people are starting to learn in a different way because of those challenges that they're facing? So in regards to kind of budgets, finance, etc., are they finding different avenues to find the content that they need to help improve themselves, help improve their skills?
To a very low extent, I would say, Katie, there are those that find a way to learn, and of course the opportunities are there, but I don't see a lot of people taking up those opportunities. I think we're fortunate here in Vintu to have like all the resources that we would need in terms of technology, connectivity, and all other opportunities for learning. But I think very little people are taking advantage of those opportunities. I'll give a very practical example. There are massive open learning platforms on the internet, YouTube, or as they like to call it, University of YouTube. LinkedIn offers courses, and then there's all sorts of sort of community or so public spaces and opportunities for people to learn, but very few people are actually taking up those opportunities. Hopefully that's an avenue that people will explore more going forward.
So do you think it's actually more of at a formal level that people are actually going out and doing their training then, rather than using kind of YouTube, etc., like you just explained?
Yes, spot on. And I think really there's a certain level of prestige tied to learning that I think is a barrier in a sense, where if you don't get a certificate, or if that certificate doesn't have a specific institution's name on it, then it doesn't mean much. So people, or in my experience at least, quite a number of people are interested in the actual paper. And of course, there is some I understand why, because certain brands and certain institutions offer a specific quality, but it seems like more and more people are interested in the paper and what they get out at the end, rather than the process and the actual knowledge and competencies that they gain. But like I said, this is not can be generalized across the entire populace, but it's something that I've observed. There are those that make use of these other platforms and seek out informal ways to learn, either through mentorship or through these public platforms and the internet, to learn new skills and learn from others.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see, especially in the UK, people move towards recording kind of informal training. And I think that's really important because, like you said, in regards to budget, finance, etc., not everyone can afford to go on to qualifications. They don't necessarily have the time to do that, etc., whatever that barrier is. But obviously, they might have time to pick up and understand some more skills in a different way. And I think it's really good that if companies are able to capture that experience that people are getting, because obviously there's still a lot of people out there that are really knowledgeable in a topic and that do have a skill set. They might just not have the formal qualification to go with it. So obviously you've got quite a varied career, and you've got lots of other projects that you're working on at the moment as well. Where do you see your career going in the future?
This is probably going to be politically incorrect in the sense that I'm an HR practitioner and I give career guidance. But to be honest with you, Katie, I have no idea. And I mean that in the best way possible. I think what learning does for you is that it opens up so many doors. And that's part of the reason why I do so many things. And that's part of the reason why when I introduce myself, I say I'm afraid to put myself in a box. I feel like there's so many paths that I can go down and make a success out of it. And that's obviously all to learning. I think it was Alvin Toffler who said, that the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those that can't read and write, but those that can learn and learn and relearn. So I think anything that I put my mind to, whether it's completely transitioning to a new career or pivoting my career and moving into a different specialization, I haven't made up my mind yet because it's a whole world out there. For now, I think I'm quite happy in the HR field, but no telling what the future looks like.
Do you think you'll stay in Namibia to do that career, or to stay in the learning career, or do you want to move or travel the world or anything like that?
Yes, I definitely see myself moving in the next 5 years. Uh, Perhaps sooner, but I definitely see myself moving out there. I think I've had an opportunity to work with and for international organizations, and I feel there's so much value and richness in working with these multinational companies where there's so much diversity in terms of background, culture, ethnicity, and so forth, but more so in terms of perspectives. And I think for me, obviously, working in a different country and working at an international level is good in terms of traveling and getting exposure to some of these cultures, but more so in terms of continuously learning and really pushing myself and breaking barriers in my own career and in my own goals.
No, I definitely think that's a good way of going about things, and you're in a lucky position that you are able to work with different people from different backgrounds. So Jonas, what do you think the future of learning looks like?
That's a really good question, Katie. I think the world of work is changing, and I always say that learning and education is a means to an end. So learning is a means to work, and work is a means to a good life, whatever as individuals we define that as. So the world of work has transformed quite a bit, especially after COVID-19. But even before then, we could see a lot of technological changes in mindsets and ideas on how work should be done. So we're moving more from a sort of rigid, scheduled work mode where you're expected to be in the office or a specific location at a specific time, attend meetings at a specific time, and do things in a sort of structured way. And we're seeing work become more fluid and flexible, especially with flexible work arrangements, remote work, and even people being located in one geographical location and working for an organization in a completely different one. So I think learning has a lot of catching up to do with the world of work and with the pace of transformation. One, there should be a shift. I see a shift from the traditional way of learning, which is more sort of institutionalized, to a more informal way of learning, self-paced or on-demand, and tailored so that sort of moving away from a one size fits all. So if I start and if I'm learning something and I already have a certain level of competence, then I shouldn't be starting where the next person is starting. And if someone has a higher level of competence than I have, then they shouldn't start where I'm learning, where I'm starting. Same as preferences in terms of learning. I mean, some people are visual, others learn better by hearing, others learn better by doing. So some of these elements really need to be incorporated into learning so that learning can catch up with the world of work, because at the end of the day, these two things are very more closely interacted than we realize. So I see that as the future of learning.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I think it's what everyone's striving to achieve. Is we often hear the phrase like learning in the flow of work, etc. But I don't think we're quite there with it. We haven't got that kind of online Google esque ability quite yet in organizations. We're getting there with the use of learning platforms, etc. I think it's just how organizations then choose to streamline how they're getting information out and keeping their content up to date, etc. I think that's the key bit to help with those informal pieces of learning, and being able to capture those as well and record those to make sure that people are getting the right skills that they need, but in a way that is more of their preference.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think even from a practitioner consultant's perspective, I think this transition is forcing, if I can use that word, forcing practitioners and training and learning consultants to be more enablers of learning than providers of learning, really. So through platforms, through resources, to organizations, rather than organization having to go to them or they having to go to the organization. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think sometimes as well, we tend to reinvent the wheel a lot in organizations. And I always use this example, is fire safety training. We don't need to create that content specifically for an organization. There's tons of information out there about fire safety training. Fire is made exactly the same way. You might have specific policies and procedures, but you can weave those into the more practical videos that are generic. And I think that's what we need to really use, is use the information that is out there, as opposed to necessarily kind of recreating it constantly, and then focus on the bits that might need to be created because they are specific to an organization.
100%. It's been the same in my experience as well. And what I've noticed, especially organizations that are very intentional to say we want to be a learning organization, which is really an organization that values individual and team learning, and that's the basis of their sustained competitive advantage. Those organizations are really moving towards, like you said, not reinventing the wheel, recording sessions, and really knowledge management as a key factor. And I think the ones that are doing it right are obviously leveraging technology, but more and more, I'm realizing that a lot of organizations are implementing gamification, which is super important for a learning organization, because you need to sort of encourage and make learning as fun and as less strenuous as possible. So I think gamification, whether it's in terms of informal learning, or just, through icebreakers and all of these things where you create these moments where people can learn from each other and teach each other. I think that's what the organizations that are mastering this concept of a learning organization, that's what they're doing right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's providing that flexibility to learn as well. And I was actually speaking to someone, he's a bit younger than me, but he's at university, and I was saying, oh, do you have to log on and always be on time for your lectures, etc.? Because obviously back in the day you had to physically go to them, but he can now do them online.
Yes.
And he said, no, like, they record them, I can catch up when I want, and I can send my lecturer notes or questions after that time period. And I think with that new generation coming into the workforce, we need to have that flexibility in regards to learning, because people aren't going to want to be pigeonholed and just put into a workshop that's done on a particular date at a particular time, because I don't think people are going to turn up. They're not going to be used to working like that. They're going to be used to that flexibility that's been provided through their higher education, etc. So I think this is a turning point that organizations really do need to realize, and provide that level of flexibility and variety when it comes to learning as well.
100%, Katie.
If people want to follow your journey and follow more about your story and see where you end up in the next 5 years, how do they go about doing so?
I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. That's Jonas Ileka on LinkedIn. So anyone that wants to connect, wants to collaborate, wants to just have a virtual coffee or soundboard, I think LinkedIn is the best platform to find me, and most of my work is on LinkedIn, where you then can find all these other links where we can also connect.
Okay, thank you. We'll put those links in the show notes below. Jonas, it's been lovely to talk to you today. Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, looking forward to seeing where your journey takes you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I think this is a wonderful platform for learning practitioners and generally anyone interested in learning. So it was an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Learning Reinvented podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've not already done so, please follow our podcast. And if the Learning Effect can help you and your organisation, please do get in touch. You can find both James and Katie on LinkedIn, and our contact details are in the show notes below.